Everybody, and it's great to be here. I want to thank my colleagues, Senators Murray, Stabenow, Durbin, Smith, Wyden, Cantwell, Hirono, Cortez Masto, and Blumenthal for being here, and then the so many great groups that are with us here and have been by our side, and we've been their side through thick and thin. And we're always going to be together, and we are going to win. So I want to thank everybody. And on Sunday, what should have been the celebration of the 50th anniversary of Roe v. Wade, America mourned instead. America mourned. We mourned the fact that millions of women and girls now have fewer rights than their mothers and grandmothers. We mourned the loss of individual freedom. We mourned the loss of a woman's right to choose. So on Sunday, which should have been a day of celebration, was a day of mourning. Last year, after decades of plotting and insidious efforts, the MAGA Supreme Court stripped millions of women of the right to abortion, putting the power to make personal health care decisions firmly in the hands of MAGA extreme Republicans. Immediately after the Dobbs decision, Leader McConnell threatened a nationwide abortion ban, meaning no one in any state is safe. And Senator Graham proposed concrete legislation to do so. This was a clear message from MAGA Republicans to women across the country. Your body, their choice. Women's bodies, MAGA Republicans' choice. How awful. How un-American. And what did the House Republicans do right after they finally got through their dysfunctional leadership fight? They continued their anti-abortion attacks with extreme legislation that intimidates and threatens doctors into not providing abortions and would make abortion access even more difficult than it is already. So that's not just rhetoric. They're trying to pass legislation. The American people rejected this type of extreme MAGA Republicanism in the last election. The American people said hell no to efforts to undermine abortion access in the country, as the last election showed. America is on our side completely, if you look across the board with what people think. The contrast is clearer than ever. Democrats will keep fighting for women and the right to choose, while MAGA Republicans keep pushing to make abortions illegal nationwide, try to punish women and doctors, and even push bans with no exceptions for rape or incest. But we are the bulwark. What they are trying to do will not pass, will not stand. We will not let it happen. Absolutely. And when the American people voted for a Democratic Senate and even increased our number against all odds, they were saying, protect women's rights, and we will. We stand. Senate Democrats stand with the American people and with American women. Senator Murray.
Well, thank you, Mr. Leader. 50 years ago, when Roe was first decided, I remember thinking about my friend who needed an abortion before that decision was made, and she could not get a safe one. And I remember hoping that stories like hers would be a thing of the past, and they should have been. On Sunday, we should have been commemorating 50 years of Roe. 50 years of women having the constitutional right to make their own health care decisions. Instead, it marked the first anniversary since Republicans overturned Roe, dragged us back half a century, struck down a constitutional right for the first time in our history, and passed ban after ban after deadly, dangerous abortion ban. It has now been exactly 7 months since the Supreme Court overturned Roe, and the months since have been really hard. They have been heartbreaking, and the healthcare crisis that followed has been horrific. In just a few months, Republicans have ripped abortion rights away from over 20 million women and overruled women's own decisions about their lives, their bodies, and their futures. But looking at this group gathered here today and looking at what happened in November, where voters backed abortion every single place it was on the ballot, I can't help but think, you know what? I did not get into politics because things were going great. Everyone who stood up and used their voice over the last many months didn't get into this fight because it was easy or comfortable. We got involved because there was too much at stake to stand on the sidelines, and the stakes have never been higher. Right now, in this country, our daughters and our granddaughters are growing up with fewer rights than I did. Right now, because of Republican bans, women are facing miscarriages and have been unable to get the care they need for days on end. They've been left bleeding, getting sicker and sicker, and pleading for help. All while doctors are being forced to compromise medical care, leave patients in pain, and even forego providing life-saving care because they fear far-right politicians will jail them for doing their jobs. And if that weren't enough, Republicans have investigated a doctor for providing care for a child who was raped, proposed funding to jail people for abortions, talked about using existing laws to prosecute women who get abortions, and made it harder for patients to get birth control and even the treatments that they need for really serious issues like cancer. And I'm infuriated that anyone could look at this nightmare, look at the healthcare crisis this has caused, look at the suffering women have been forced to go through and think, you know what we need? We need more abortion restrictions. Seriously? Yet that is one of the first things the Republican House voted on. One of Republicans' top priorities is forcing women to be pregnant, no matter their circumstance, no matter their wishes. And we know the end goal, a national abortion ban. It is no secret. Well, here's my message to Republicans. The fight for abortion rights didn't end 50 years ago when Roe was decided, and it did not end last year when Roe was overturned. We are not giving up, and we're not going anywhere. My Democratic colleagues in the Senate and I will not stop fighting until every woman in America once again has the right to control her own body and her own future. We are going to be a firewall against House Republicans who every attack on our rights. We will block the outrageous bills they send our way. We are going to keep putting forth common sense legislation to protect our most fundamental rights and to restore Roe once and for all. And we are here to say the American people are with us, and reproductive rights are on the agenda this Congress. Democrats are going to keep fighting for women, fighting for patients, and fighting for the right to abortion. And we are going to win. With that, I will turn it over to Debbie Stabenow.
Thank you very much, Senator Murray and Senator Schumer. It's great to be here on a beautiful, sunshiny day with all of you to make it very, very clear where we stand in terms of making sure that every single person in this country has the freedom to make their own reproductive choices, period. And the Senate Democratic Caucus is going to make sure that that happens. We all know 50 years ago last Sunday, the Supreme Court handed down the Roe v. Wade decision, and for 50 years we had that freedom in this country. And now that national protection under the Supreme Court is gone, and young people have fewer freedoms than their moms, their grandmas, and that others that came before them. Well, I'm proud to say that in Michigan we decided to do something about it. That's not okay. And so we put together a ballot proposal that was overwhelmingly supported, over a 13-point margin. People voted in Michigan to make sure that their own health care decisions, which they know are personal, are made by them, and that we are standing up for each other and what needs to happen in terms of protecting reproductive rights. So the bottom line, it really is that this is about you, it's about each of us to make our own decisions. It's not about right-wing politicians, it's not about right-wing judges. It's about, in America, having the freedom to make your own reproductive health care decisions, period. That's what this is about. And we're going to stand with all of you to make sure that we can do everything possible to protect that freedom. I want to now introduce somebody who's on the front lines of doing that through the Senate Judiciary Committee as chair of the Senate Judiciary Committee, where we have confirmed in the last 2 years 97 new judges. And so, Senator, where are you? Senator Durbin, yes.
Thanks, Debbie. 50 years ago, Justice Harry Blackmun, who had been the general counsel for Mayo Clinic in Minnesota, sat down in that building just across the street and wrote the decision in Roe versus Wade. He was tackling an issue which had not really been directly addressed by the court in a long time, if ever. And he tried to strike a balance to guarantee a constitutional right to access to abortion and reproductive health care, and based it on a trimester system. I'd have to really think hard if there was any decision handed down by the Supreme Court that was investigated so carefully, so closely, so often, reinterpreted by court after court, state after state, legislatures addressing it. You have to go back to cases like Dred Scott, Plessy, and Brown for a decision that was so carefully scrutinized for so many years, 50 years as a matter of fact. It wasn't until Donald Trump appointed 3 MAGA Republican justices to the Supreme Court that the bottom fell out and the pendulum swung on the court to eliminate Roe versus Wade. And in one fell swoop, Justice Alito turned this over to the states, and we know what happened since. Some 24 different states have either banned or severely limited a woman's access to reproductive health care. What's going to happen to those women? They're not the richest people in the world, many of them. They struggle to get by. And they may be faced with the prospect of trying to make a trip to some state that still is protecting a woman's right to choose. It's a hardship, it's a problem. But other things are going on too which are equally concerning. I know Senator Wyden will address this. There are efforts underway in these states to make it even more difficult, if not to ban the abortion procedure. There are efforts underway to figure out a way to limit a woman's access to legally dispensed prescription drugs and over-the-counter medications. There are efforts underway to track women as they travel and come close to a clinic for assistance and to hold them legally liable. Is that your vision of America? It's not mine. My vision of America is Roe versus Wade. Taking a controversial issue and coming up with a reasonable approach to it that guaranteed a constitutional right and said the decision is ultimately to be made by the woman and her physician and her family. That is the way that should be. We come today determined to continue this battle. I will just tell you, the Republicans have got it wrong. They've had it wrong for a long time, and they happen to believe that they're on the right side of history. The last election proved that they were not. When the women across America reflected on what they had lost in the Dobbs decision, they were activated and energized to be participating in that election. I don't think it was a one and done. I think the women of America and their families are willing to fight again to bring Roe versus Wade's principles of the constitutional right to reproductive health care back as a major issue in the United States of America, as it should be. This time I'd like to introduce from Minnesota, the home of Justice Blackmun, Senator Tina Smith.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Durbin, and thanks to all of my colleagues and to all of you for being here. Good morning. When I worked at Planned Parenthood, I used to dread the anniversary of Roe versus Wade. On that day at our clinic, the anti-choice protesters would be in front of the doors to our clinic with their ugly signs and their cruel messages, and the women in Minnesota would have to walk through that line in order to get the basic health care that they knew that they needed. And now here we are 50 years after Roe, and Roe is no more. And we have seen the consequences of that for people and for their providers, the chaos that that has caused in the healthcare system, the damage that it has done to people, to women seeking out the health care that they need, providers who find that they have to talk to their lawyers before they can make decisions about the best health care for their patients, women who are faced with traveling across state lines, who are faced with postponing needed medical care because of this ridiculous situation that we're in. And why is this happening? This is happening, as Americans now understand, because extremist Republicans decided that they knew better than women whose lives and stories they will never know what kind of health care they needed. That is unacceptable in this country. And the voters of this country agreed. When we had this last election and pundits and others suggested that abortion rights, abortion freedom, reproductive freedom was never going to be a salient issue for voters, we saw that that is not the case. So here in the United States Senate, we are going to continue to fight in every way that we know how to protect and expand reproductive freedom, including abortion. We are going to do everything we can to make sure that people have access to medication abortion, which is the way in which over 50% of Americans are now getting access to abortion care. And we're going to do everything that we can, and especially we are going to fight to stop the abortion bans that we know the Republican Party is hell-bent to put into place. That is the work ahead of us. I'm proud to stand with these incredible allies and healthcare providers who are working on the front lines to try to protect the health and the freedom of women and people everywhere in this country. And now I am very pleased to be here and proud to introduce next to you my colleague, Senator Ron Wyden from Oregon.
Thank you, Senator Smith. And my colleagues have said it well, and I'm going to be very brief. The bottom line in America is every single day, right-wing men are trying to claw back women's right to privacy. And the fact of the matter is, America is already seeing the dangers of a post-Roe country. Patients are having difficulty getting the care that they need. Doctors are frightened about the possibility of jail time for doing their job. And when a woman searches for health care information on their computer, they can have that weaponized against them. In our part of the world, people have taken to calling it uterus surveillance. And the problem is there just aren't any rules with respect to tracking people's private and personal information. And it's why in a minute I'm going to have a chance to introduce Senator Cantwell, who is the chair of the Commerce Committee, is our leader on privacy, and it's a pleasure for our whole caucus to work with her. One last point that I would make, though, and that is you are going to get one big dose of hypocrisy in this whole debate. For many, many months, we were hearing all this talk that this would be a states' rights issue. It's all going to go back to the states. And I've joked with Senator Durbin about it in the past. Some of these Republicans think states' rights is basically only if you agree if the state is right. That really is their kind of approach. So after all those months of claiming it was going to be a states' rights issue, what do we hear? A big shift to a national ban. We'd open up our newspaper and we'd see our Senate Republican colleagues strategizing for a national ban. So you can't make this stuff up. It's all there, plain and simple. I have the pleasure of introducing our privacy leader, who's going to be so essential in this area of protecting women's rights, my friend, Senator Cantwell. By the way, you've got 100% of Oregon and Washington's United States senators pro-choice on this issue, and we're very proud. Senator Cantwell.
Thank you, Senator Wyden. In November, Republicans, Democrats, and independents made it clear it was not okay to overrun the rights of women, override the rights of women in the United States of America. They made that clear. And now it is time for our Republican colleagues in the United States Senate to join us and pass a federal law that protects a woman's right to choose in every state in the United States of America. We're not going to just have the House of Representatives continue to demean the healthcare services of women in America. Even though I come from a state that has long protected Roe v. Wade in our state statute, the Supreme Court ruling has affected our state's healthcare delivery system. It has affected patients and doctors even in our state. For example, after Roe v. Wade fell, Planned Parenthood in eastern Washington reported a number of patients from Idaho jumping up to 78%. This is now an ongoing crisis for our state's reproductive health care system. People in Idaho are not going to stop getting pregnant, and they are not going to stop seeking the best medical care. They are going to cross our borders. Not only are women coming from Idaho, they're coming from Texas, they're coming from Florida, where governments have decided they will take away the control of a woman's body. This is likely to mean fewer available reproductive health care appointments, longer wait times, and especially the trying incidents of people trying to continue to strip those rights away and put pressure on medical professionals not to deliver this care. Some states are now imposing penalties or jail sentences on doctors who perform abortions. Our medical providers wonder if their own health insurance will be subject to challenges because of the cost of continuing to providing these cares. They should not be penalized just for providing this help. We need safe abortions. We need women to make sure that in every part of the United States they can get access to the health care they deserve. We are continuing to hear from constituents all over our state about the delays in access to care, the challenges that they are facing, and the scrutiny that even they get when they are trying to make sure that access is there and available. The United States Senate needs to act. We are not going to play defense. We are going to play offense. We're here to stand with these organizations to say to our Republican colleagues, it's time that they stand up and help protect a woman's right to choose. This is a constitutional right to privacy that previous courts clearly outlined and was settled law for 50 years. The only unsettling thing here is that Republicans think they can get away with it. I'm now going to introduce my colleague from Hawaii. Actually, I'm going to introduce my colleague from Nevada, a champion on this issue, our great advocate, Senator Cortez Masto.
Thank you, Maria. Thank you, everyone, for joining. I will be brief. I am proudly from a state that so strongly believed in Roe versus Wade that we codified it in 1990. That's how important it is for the people of the state of Nevada. And I say Nevadans because this crosses party lines, it crosses gender. 2/3 of the voters in 1990 voted to codify Roe versus Wade in the state of Nevada. And if you poll voters today, 2/3 still support it. And that's why I'm here. So many people during this past election, Republicans, Democrats, men, women, came out outraged at what we saw the Supreme Court doing when they repealed Roe versus Wade in this country. And so for Nevadans, this is an issue worth fighting for. And let's be very clear, and Ron Wyden, my colleague, pointed this out. This is hypocrisy at an extreme level by extremists on the far right who want to wrap and cloak themselves in the flag and the First Amendments, run around talking about due process, liberty, and equal protection, but only when it suits them. Because this is clearly about personal freedom. And if you do believe in those freedoms and due process and civil liberty, you are going to support and fight for individuals' personal freedom, particularly when it comes to health care in this country. It is hypocritical, and they're not done. We see it every single day in the state of Nevada, women coming to our state for their health care needs. And now we have our extreme Republicans trying to block women from traveling to my state and trying to criminalize those women and those doctors who in my state have supported the right of women to choose. So hypocrisy is on the extreme with these far right, including the idea that this is a states' rights issue. Because if they truly believe that, they would not be blocking my state, who had made the decision to support women and doctors in my state, and they would not be on a path to criminalize them. That's why I have introduced the freedom to travel for women for health care in this country. That also protects our doctors from providing the essential health care to women in need. We will continue to fight in the Senate And believe me, it's not just the Senate. It's not just those of us in Congress. It is a majority of the American public that believe in what we do. We are on the right side of history. We are on the right side of freedoms for women in this country and so many others. And that is worth fighting for, and we are not done. So I am proud to stand with my colleagues here, to call it what it is, hypocrisy from the far right extreme, and continue to stand with so many across this country who believe in personal freedoms. And so I am proud to join my colleagues and continue this fight. And now let me introduce to you my incredible colleague who's been on the forefront of this, Senator Dick Blumenthal. Thank you, Dick.
Thank you, Catherine. I'm Richard Blumenthal of Connecticut, the home of Griswold versus Connecticut, the first case by the United States Supreme Court on the right of privacy. I want everyone to remember how you felt when Dobbs came down. I want everyone to remember the hurt and anger. Hold it in your heart. And to the men of America, this cause is your fight too. It's not a women's issue. It is a human issue. Women's rights are human rights. And Dobbs demeans your rights as much as it does any women's rights in America. Republicans are on the wrong side of history, they're on the wrong side of the law, and they are on the wrong side of the politics here. I ran for re-election last November, as did many of my colleagues. Reproductive rights were an issue, not just any issue. They were a defining issue. You are going to drive yourselves into a smaller and smaller minority in the United States Senate and the Congress because you reflect a smaller and smaller minority among the American people. The American people believe in the right of privacy, the right to be let alone when making personal decisions about your own body. I clerked for Justice Blackmun in that building about 50 years ago, in the term right after Roe v. Wade. Dobbs would have been unthinkable. In fact, the debate today would have been unimaginable back then. But here we are. And when I wrote and introduced the Women's Health Protection Act 10 years ago, Dobbs would have been unthinkable and unimaginable. But today we need to unite against these efforts that would control, criminalize, and dehumanize women in a way that should be unthinkable and unimaginable in the United States of America. So we're going to continue fighting. Make no mistake, the Women's Health Protection Act, the Right to Travel Act that Senator Cortez Masto is championing, these measures are not going to be accomplished in the next 2 weeks or the next 2 months, maybe not even in the next 2 years. I'm very clear-eyed about this cause. But we're going to keep fighting. And I will tell you, as I stand here in the shadow of the United States Supreme Court and the Congress, the Women's Health Protection Act guarantees will be restored as the law of the land because it is America. We are better than Dobbs, and we will be better because of the enormously important advocacy by groups like Planned Parenthood and NARAL, and I have the great honor to introduce now the head of NARAL. Senator Hirono, whom I just left in the Judiciary Committee.
That's why we're both here now, because we're from the same
And an absolutely steadfast and eloquent advocate. In all seriousness, I'm very honored to be here with Senator Hirono. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. We should be standing here celebrating the 50th anniversary of Roe, but instead, We are here fighting for a person's right to control their own body. Abortion is a really important issue to me. You know, there are teenagers all across the country awakening to the fact that they no longer control their own bodies. And abortion was the first issue in which I wrote to my members of Congress in Hawaii asking, what is your position on abortion? I was in college at that time. And I wanted to know because Hawaii was the first state in the union to decriminalize abortion. So this was a big issue in our state legislature. And the person who carried that bill to make abortion legal in Hawaii was a very strong practicing Catholic. And the governor who allowed that act to get into law was a very strong Catholic governor who went to Mass every single day. So this should not be, you know, an issue based on religion. So here we are, right after the Supreme Court overturned Roe, which I have to say the advocates of abortion, they really stayed the course for 50 years. But right after that, 26 states eliminated abortion care. And there are other states that would like to do so. And state legislatures all across the country have mobilized, and the extreme Republicans would like to make it that much harder to control our bodies. And they're not just trying to ban abortion, but also to go after contraception, including emergency contraception. 9 states have taken steps to restrain emergency contraception. So it's not enough that they are making it that much harder for us to control our bodies by being able to get an abortion, but we can't even get emergency contraception in these states. Everyone should have access to not just abortion and control of our own bodies, but to emergency contraception, and that is what is happening all across the country. And as I said, there are young people awakening to the fact that they have fewer rights than their mothers, their grandmothers, and they are going to mobilize just as I was mobilized around this issue, and we will continue to fight for a person's right to control their own bodies, bodily autonomy. Mahalo, everyone. Is there anybody following me? Oh, there you go. Come on.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you so much.
You.
Hi, good morning. I'm Minnie Tamaraju. I'm the president of NARAL Pro-Choice America. Thank you, Senator Blumenthal, who tried to introduce me, and thank you, Senator Hirono, for her lifelong advocacy and work. It's an honor to be here alongside advocates, patients, providers, and most importantly, our champions in the U.S. Senate. At NARAL, we represent the 8 in 10 Americans who believe that everybody, no matter who they are or where they live, should be able to make their own decisions about their lives, bodies, and futures. And we are so proud to stand with Senate Democrats as they fight alongside us to restore the right to abortion and achieve reproductive freedom for everybody. I want to thank Senator Murray, Leader Schumer, and all of our champions here in the Senate for reflecting the values of the American people and making them a priority. And I think, as you know by now, this weekend was what would have marked the 50th anniversary of Roe v. Wade, is the 50th anniversary of Roe v. Wade. For 49 years prior, we marked this date by celebrating our constitutional right to abortion. And this year, we find ourselves 7 months into a crisis caused by the GOP and an increasingly extremist court. Thanks to the GOP's anti-choice agenda, millions of Americans are facing the reality of life without access to abortion care, as these bans put their lives and health at danger. In some cases, pregnant people are forced to travel to other states, as you've heard, sometimes hundreds of miles for the care they need. You've heard the stories today. You're going to hear a few more from my colleagues. We know that for too many Americans, however, traveling across states, it's just simply out of reach. Finding childcare, paying for gas, expensive hotels, taking time and days off from work, these are barriers too high to overcome. Since the Supreme Court's decision overturning Roe, the deluge of state abortion bans that have followed, we've seen tragedy play out across the country. Pregnant people have endured nightmarish scenarios. Families don't know where to turn. And Americans, we are outraged. Last summer, after the court overturned Roe, people across the country began to mobilize. And when Election Day came, It was very, very clear. They made their voices clear. In states around the country and across the political spectrum, people have risen up to say, we support the right to abortion. But within the first few weeks of power, House Republicans passed several anti-choice measures. They have made restricting abortion their top priority. The GOP continues to ignore us despite how loud and clear Americans have made themselves. They would rather put our lives in danger than to give up on their selfish quest for power. In the states, lawmakers keep pushing for bans and restrictions, including attempts to block medication abortion care, contraception, and fertility treatments like IVF, which is why it's so important that Democrats in the Senate continue to fight for reproductive freedom. And they have shown that protecting our fundamental rights is their top priority, that we can count on them to continue to fight. And we know, as they've said already, but I want to repeat, they will be a critical backstop against the increasingly rampant extremism of House Republicans. Since Roe was overturned, Senate Democrats have led the charge to defend our fundamental rights, fighting to pass the Women's Health Protection Act, landmark legislation that would lock the right to abortion into federal law and prevent a nationwide ban. Our priorities are clear. We are fighting not just to restore the legal right to abortion, but also to make sure that everybody has access to the care they need. As we face the tragic consequences of living in a post-Roe America, we need Democratic leaders to continue to put reproductive freedom at the top of the national agenda, and they have proven that they will. If we keep fighting, freedom will prevail. And together, all of us, just a reminder, we are the majority. And with that, I'd like to ask Dr. Floyd with Planned Parenthood to come up.
Thank you very much, Minnie. I appreciate the introduction. So, my name is Dr. Serena Floyd. I use she, her pronouns. I am the Chief Medical Officer at Planned Parenthood of Metropolitan Washington, D.C. I'm a board-certified obstetrician-gynecologist, and I've been in practice for over 20 years. I am a daughter, I'm a sister, I am an aunt, and I'm a mother. I am also an abortion provider. I made the decision many years ago to become an OBGYN physician because I wanted to have a meaningful impact in others' lives. I became an abortion provider because I saw in it an opportunity to provide compassionate, non-judgmental care to those with an absolute right to make personal decisions about what is best for themselves and their families. Now, as I attempt to navigate being that provider at a time when women and pregnant people are being stripped of their basic human right to the routine health care that is abortion, I am saddened, I am frustrated, and I am angry. But I am also determined. I, like so many of my colleagues around the country, witness every day the effect of this total disregard for patient autonomy and agency. Disregard that disproportionately affects Black people, Indigenous people, people of color, people living on low incomes, gender diverse individuals, immigrants, adolescents, those living with disabilities, and those living in rural communities. Bearing witness to this disregard and how it plays out in lived experiences continues to fuel our collective resilience and our fierce determination to keep showing up for our patients however we can. For me, it means that when my patient experiencing homelessness in Louisiana is able to connect with advocates to help her navigate the financial and logistical obstacles she has to overcome to get to DC for care, I'm here to care for her. It means that when my colleague from Texas reaches out to try to get the pregnant 17-year-old with her whole life ahead of her, the abortion that will allow her a better chance at that life, I am here to take that call. At our Planned Parenthood, we are caring for patients from all over the U.S., from as far as Texas to as close as Georgia. And we are here for all of them. We accept and take care of them for many reasons, but most important among them is because we know what happens when abortion is out of reach. We know that many individuals unable to get an abortion are often left with no choice but to carry that pregnancy to term. And we know when that happens, the likelihood that they will experience economic hardship, financial insecurity, that they will be more likely to stay in violent relationships, and they will be more likely to suffer poor health outcomes is real. We know that in a country with already ridiculously high maternal mortality rates, a woman from a state with an abortion ban is estimated to be nearly 3 times more likely to die during pregnancy, in childbirth, or soon after delivery. This knowledge keeps us going. When I consider the world we live in now and the assault on sexual and reproductive health that is occurring, my drive for my fight is also intensified when I consider my daughters. I consider the world I want them to live in, the lives I want them to be able to lead, the control over their destinies that I want them to have, and my resolve deepens. So I want to thank all of the Senate members who have been in this fight with us and who are continuing this fight with us, and I want to thank you all for your time. And now I want to turn the mic over to Claire Coleman.
I'm Claire Coleman from the National Family Planning and Reproductive Health Association. We represent contraceptive and sexual health providers in all 50 states, DC, and several of the territories. We represent a diverse coalition of providers, federally qualified health centers, state and local health departments, Planned Parenthood affiliates, and other private not-for-profits. And before I came to NFRA, I was out in the field running a healthcare system too. So you can trust me when I say that you can't find a more dedicated, tenacious, and resourceful group of people just like Dr. Floyd, working in our health center systems all around the country. It's my honor to be a voice for them today. So I want to tell you what I heard from one of our members in Texas, a midwife who has spent years supporting women, listening to women, and trusting women. She told me how hard it is to work in a state where access to a full range of methods and options is not available to all people, where access is limited and the most vulnerable among us have the least amount of autonomy. She said every day she's asked to do something outside her comfort zone, something completely new to her, and that entering the sacred space that was the exam room is now a political exercise. States like Texas have become the test lab for the most egregious and restrictive policies around sexual and reproductive health care. And while laws are being dismantled and people are looking on with horror, NFRA members want you to know that as goes Texas, so goes the nation. This incredible leader and many others just like her around the country see their work as service to those who seek contraception, sexual health care, and abortion care. And they try during very difficult days to go to work with an attitude not of, I have to get through this, but I get to do this. Each person seen in our health centers is a life change. They represent autonomy, empowerment, and the path towards a chosen future. I think they're healthcare heroes, and they deserve all the fight, all the focus, and all the funding that we can collectively muster to support them as they work to meet critical needs for sexual and reproductive health care. And I want to be clear, there's no amount of contraception that will change the need for abortion. Abortion's an essential service, and millions of people need abortion every year. That's why I'm so proud to work alongside coalition partners across the country and here today. I'm really grateful to the champions that we've seen amongst the Democratic caucus. We know that not all of them were here, but a good amount of them were. And we know that they're committed to be with us in the fight. But this is our fight. It's our fight to protect everyone's right to contraception, to reclaim everyone's right to have an abortion, and to respect everyone's freedom and autonomy. And I can promise you that NFRA members understand that this is not a short-term effort, and we will be in this fight for generations to come. I'm glad to be here and also glad to introduce my colleague, Monica Edwards from URGE.
Thanks so much, Claire. Good morning. My name is Monica Edwards. I use she, her pronouns, and I serve as the Federal Policy Manager with URGE, which stands for Unite for Reproductive and Gender Equity. On behalf of URGE's Executive Director, Kimberly Inez McGuire, I would love to thank Leader Schumer, Senator Murray, Senator Hirono, Senator Blumenthal, and all of the senators today for inviting us to be here. And also thank you for your continued leadership for reproductive health, rights, and justice. URGE is a young people's reproductive justice organization working primarily in the South and in the Midwest. Specifically, we work in Ohio, Kansas, California, Georgia, Texas, and my home state of Alabama. So if you're an Alabama fan out there, roll tide. If that term reproductive justice is new to you, let me briefly explain. Reproductive justice is the human right and human framework and movement started by and led by Black women. Essentially, reproductive justice states that we all deserve to decide if, when, and how we want to start our families, and to do so in safe and sustainable communities. As you can imagine, many of URGE's young people and young people across the country have been heavily impacted since the Supreme Court's decision to overturn Roe and nearly 50 years of precedent last June. And we know that, unfortunately, the impact of the Dobbs decision and the resulting abortion bans will fall hardest on young people, young Black, Indigenous, Latin, Asian American, and Pacific Islander women, as well as queer, transgender, non-binary, and gender-expansive people of color. We have proven consistently as young people that we are resilient, but we should not have to be. We deserve to have the tenets of reproductive justice to be actualized, and that starts with restoring our right to make our own decisions about our own bodies. But make no mistake, we will continue to fight until all people have access to safe and affordable abortion care without shame, without stigma, or political interference. And while Roe was an essential foundation for abortion access, let's be clear, it was never enough. Now it is my sincere hope that you will all join URGE, our young people, our reproductive justice advocates and colleagues standing with me today, and all of the young people across the nation in building back better, a future towards abortion justice and reproductive justice. And we want a reality where reproductive justice is a reality for all, not some. And to quote the fearless Angela Davis, I am no longer accepting the things I cannot change. I am changing the things that I cannot accept. And with that, I think I'm turning it over to Kelly.
Good afternoon, everyone. To the members of the Senate, thank you so much for joining us this morning and for inviting me to speak. Like many here, I spent Sunday reflecting on abortion justice in this country and how I'm living proof of its power. My contraception failure and unplanned pregnancy at 21 caught me off guard as I was about to start finals at my university in Connecticut. I went to my campus infirmary where I was referred to an independent clinic, and after an hour's drive, I was seen and given mifepristone by my provider. 36 hours later, I took my misoprostol and I sat for the first of my finals. It was as simple as that. Among the storytellers I've met since my abortion, my story sticks out for nothing more than being easy. I can't pinpoint where that ease came from. My access to transportation or public health care, my racial and gender identity, or the sheer look that I was just old enough to be a legal adult. What I can identify is an unacceptably stark reality. Too many across this country do not share in the same ease for their abortions. To know these realities and then not do anything about it is not just unacceptable. It's admitting defeat. It's letting people make decisions about our bodies, lives, and futures. Abortion opponents are ignorant to abortion's lasting power. When I finally shared my story with members of my family, I discovered I would not physically exist if not for timely and accessible miscarriage care. My abortion motivated me to guarantee the same empowerment in healthcare for others, so I earned my bachelor's and law degrees as a first-generation student. My abortion empowered me in ways that I could have never foreseen. I want other people to have that same level of access and empowerment. I try and seek this out through donations to fund abortion access regardless of home state, through public testimony to call for policy change that addresses racial, wealth, and access gaps in care, and I patently refuse to accept Dobbs as the end of my fight. Abortions have been happening for centuries. The will of people who have never been pregnant cannot and will not be accepted as the final word on a deeply personal and nuanced topic that they know nothing about. Today I stand here with these lawmakers and professionals with a clear call to action. Nobody gets to give up on abortion. This healthcare can still be a reality and one that we will reach with creativity, tenacity, and the support of every single body. It will not be reached overnight, but we are all in this for the long haul. If you've ever had to navigate your reproductive health care, you are still in this fight. If you drove a friend to Planned Parenthood, if you speak out on access gaps and inequalities, or if you simply believe that you know yourself and your needs best more than a politician, you too have a place on this team. The overturn of Roe was never our cue to throw in the towel. If anything, it is our sign that when we join together on this issue, we're going to win. Thank you very much.
Thank you all for being here. I think we've had the last speaker. I want to say once again, we are all in this together. If any of you have any questions,